The doctor slipped me a note during my routine checkup. Don't go home. Run. My hands shook as I read it again in the parking lot. Why would my family doctor warn me about my own house? That night, I discovered the horrifying truth about the people I trusted most. They thought I was just a confused old woman who'd never figure it out. But what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment longer than they could imagine, and tomorrow, their perfect plan would become their worst nightmare. The fluorescent light above Dr. Thompson's examination table flickered with that familiar electrical buzz. I waited for my test results. At 72, these quarterly visits had become as routine as brewing my morning coffee. The door clicked open. Dr. Thompson entered, but something was different. His usual warm smile had vanished, replaced by the tight expression of a man carrying dangerous news. In his hand, a folded slip of paper trembled slightly. "Mrs. Morrison, your test results are normal," he said loudly, his voice carrying the artificial cheer doctors use for bad news. But his eyes were screaming something else entirely. He approached with the prescription pad, his movements deliberate, practiced. "I'm prescribing new vitamins for you." As he handed me the fake prescription, his fingers pressed a small folded paper into my palm. The contact lasted only a second, but I felt the urgency radiating from his touch, like heat from a flame. "Please read the instructions carefully," he emphasized, his gaze boring into mine. The paper burned against my skin. Whatever was written on it, I knew it would change everything. My Toyota Camry sat in the parking lot like a loyal dog, its blue paint faded but trustworthy. I slid behind the wheel, my arthritic fingers fumbling with the door locks. The autumn sun slanted through the windshield, but I felt cold bone deep cold. With shaking hands, I unfolded Dr. Thompson's note. His handwriting, usually precise from years of medical charts, was rushed, desperate. "Don't go home. Run! David and Amanda have been asking about your will and life insurance. They asked me what dosage of heart medication could cause death. I suspect they plan to harm you. Trust me, call me from somewhere safe." I read it 3 times. Each word felt like a physical blow. David. My David. The little boy I'd rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd paid by selling everything I owned. Amanda, who I'd welcomed as a daughter, who'd lived in my house rent-free for 10 years. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the rearview mirror, a black BMW sat 3 spaces back. David's car. Had he followed me here? The paper crinkled as my fingers tightened. 50 years of sacrifice, of putting their needs before mine, and this was how it ended? With a doctor's warning to run from my own family? Sitting in that parking lot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind pulled me backward through the years. The memories came flooding back like water through a broken dam. I could hear my own voice, 30 years younger. "I'm turning it down," I'd told William at our kitchen table, folding that promotion letter. "David needs me home." "Family comes first," I'd said so confidently. "I can always go back later." But I never did. The memory shifted to William's hospital bed, his weak voice. "Take care of yourself, too. Don't disappear into taking care of everyone else." But I had disappeared. After his funeral, I'd given everything for David's future. My career, my savings, my independence, all sacrificed for a son who now wanted me dead. The sound of a car door slamming jolted me back to the present, back to the terrible truth that my happiness had never been enough for them. I drove aimlessly, my mind racing through the past few weeks like a horror movie. Amanda's sudden interest. "Mom, how many heart pills do you take?" They look so strong. David's legal probing. "When did you last update your will?" Jake's casual cruelty. "Grandma's gonna live forever." So annoying. And my digoxin disappeared faster than normal. When I'd mentioned it, Amanda quickly produced a replacement bottle. By Miller's Pond, I called Dr. Thompson. They came yesterday asking about lethal digoxin doses, he said. When I refused, they said they'd find another doctor. My world tilted, not just thinking actively planning my murder. Give me 48 hours, I said. I spent 30 years catching financial criminals. I know how to gather proof. Margaret Wilson's front porch light cast a warm circle in the growing dusk. I stood on her doorstep with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back, feeling like a refugee from my own life. Margaret opened the door, her nurse-trained eyes immediately assessing my condition. We'd been friends for 30 years, through book clubs and church bake sales, through William's illness and her husband's death 2 years ago. Tess? What's wrong? I think my family wants to kill me. Without hesitation, she pulled me inside, into the safety of her cluttered living room with its doilies and cat photos and the persistent smell of lavender air freshener. As I told her everything, Margaret's expression hardened. She'd never liked Amanda and had often warned me about her mercenary nature. But this was beyond even her worst predictions. "We'll get evidence," she said, disappearing into her bedroom closet. She returned with a small digital recorder, the kind she'd used for patient notes during her nursing career. "This can record for 8 hours. You'll wear it tomorrow when you go back." Go back? The thought made my stomach clench. Honey, you're Tessa Morrison. You once brought down an entire corporate board for embezzlement. You can handle 3 greedy relatives. Through her front window, I watched the black BMW cruise slowly past. They were looking for me, and they wouldn't give up easily. The hunt had begun. My phone exploded with calls at 7 in the morning. David's name flashed on the screen, but his voice carried the edge of barely controlled panic. "Mom, where are you? You didn't come home last night." I pressed the recorder's start button. "I stayed at Margaret's house. I didn't want to disturb you and Amanda." "Disturb us?" "Mom, we were worried sick. Amanda barely slept." In the background, I could hear Amanda's shrill voice. "That crazy old woman! Making us worry like this. I'll be home this afternoon." "No!" David's lawyer facade cracked completely. "You come home right now or I'm calling the police to report you missing." The threat hung in the air like smoke. My own son, weaponizing law enforcement against me. "I'll be there soon," I said, and hung up. Margaret handed me a cup of coffee, her wrinkled hands steady where mine shook. "They're scared their plan is falling apart. That's good scared people make mistakes." As I drove aimlessly through town, trying to process what Dr. Thompson had told me, my mind began connecting dots I'd been too trusting to see before. The memories came back with sickening clarity. 6 months ago, I'd been in the kitchen making Thanksgiving dinner when their voices had drifted in from the living room. Amanda's words still rang in my ears. "How much longer do you think the old woman has?" David's response had been clinical, detached. "The doctor says her heart condition. Maybe a few more years." "A few years? I can't stand this much longer. Do you know what this house is worth? $800,000. At the time, I dismissed it as frustration. Now those words felt like ice in my veins. The memory shifted to 4 months ago. I could still smell the gas that had filled my kitchen that night. Sharp, dangerous, deadly. When I'd mentioned it to Amanda the next morning, her laugh had sounded so natural. "Oh, Mom, you must have bumped the stove." These old things are so sensitive. But I remembered clearly I hadn't been near that stove. The burner had been turned to maximum. Then came the stairs 3 months ago. I could still feel my hip aching from that near fall, still remember the slick oil coating the 3rd step. Amanda called from below, "Mom, you need to be more careful. At your age, broken bones don't heal properly." Her voice had held no concern, only calculation. And just last month, my heart medication disappeared. Amanda appeared with that replacement bottle, smiling that smile that never reached her eyes. When Dr. Thompson's nurse had told me they'd never changed my prescription, I should have known. The pattern was crystal clear now as I sat at this red light, my hands gripping the wheel. Gas leaks, orchestrated falls, medication tampering. Each attempt is more direct, more desperate. They'd been trying to kill me for months, and I'd been too much of a fool to see it. Margaret's dining room became our war room. "First, we replace your heart medication with mint candies," she said, holding up identical white tablets. "These look exactly like digoxin." "What if they get suspicious?" "They won't. They're too confident." Margaret connected a tiny camera to her laptop. "This goes in your living room. It'll record everything." I called my lawyer next. "I want everything to go to Children's Haven Orphanage. David and Amanda get nothing. Keep this absolutely confidential, Robert." Margaret studied my face after I hung up. "You realize there's no going back." They chose this path when they decided I was worth more dead than alive. The Victorian house at 1247 Oak Street had been my home for 15 years. William and I had bought it after his promotion, back when we thought we had decades ahead of us. Now, walking up the familiar front steps felt like approaching my own execution. David's BMW sat in the driveway alongside Amanda's white Mercedes, the one I'd helped them lease last year. The recorder in my jacket pocket felt heavier than it should, a secret weight against my ribs. Amanda threw open the door before I could reach for my keys. Her embrace was theatrical, all perfume and false concern. "Mom!" We were so worried, but her fingers dug into my shoulders, and her voice carried an undertone of threat. David appeared in the hallway, his face pale and drawn. "Mom, you can't just disappear like that, at your age, with your condition." "I'm fine, dear. Just felt like visiting an old friend." Jake barely looked up from his phone, sprawled across the couch like a cat claiming territory. "Whatever. I thought you were finally dead." "Jake!" David snapped, but I caught the brief flash of agreement in his eyes. Amanda guided me toward the kitchen with the solicitous care of a funeral director. "You must be starving. I made your favorite soup." The pot on the stove bubbled innocuously, but my throat closed at the thought of eating anything they'd prepared. How long had they been poisoning me slowly? How many meals had contained extra medication? "That's very kind, but I'm not really hungry." "Nonsense." Amanda ladled the soup with theatrical care. "You need to keep your strength up." I accepted the bowl with steady hands, lifted the spoon to my lips, and let the liquid touch my mouth without swallowing. The performance of compliance. "Delicious," I lied, and caught the satisfied look that passed between David and Amanda. On the counter, I noticed new pill bottles. Digoxin in higher concentrations than I'd ever been prescribed. The murder weapons waiting in plain sight. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my childhood bedroom, the room William and I had shared for 20 years, listening to the house settle and whisper around me. Every creak of floorboards could be footsteps. Every whisper of wind could be voices plotting my death. At 11:30, I heard them moving through the house like hunters. David's heavier footsteps on the stairs, Amanda's lighter tread in the hallway. They paused outside my door, and I forced my breathing to remain deep and regular. "Do you think she knows anything?" Amanda's voice was barely audible through the wood. "She's 72 and trusting as a child. She doesn't suspect a thing. She didn't eat much soup. Tomorrow we will try the milk approach. Mix the pills directly in. She always drinks a glass with her morning vitamins." My hands clenched the sheets. They were discussing my murder with the casual tone they'd used to plan a grocery trip. "What about the kid?" "Jake's on board. Promised him a new iPhone and a car when it's over. He said it himself. She's lived long enough." "When?" "This week, before anyone starts asking questions." Their voices faded as they moved away, but I remained frozen under the covers, every muscle tensed for flight. My own grandson had agreed to my murder for the price of consumer electronics. But as the hours passed, something changed inside me. The fear began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. I'd spent 30 years being the victim of my own generosity. I'd given them everything, sacrificed everything, and received betrayal in return. They thought I was just a helpless old woman. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold, autumn pressing against the windows like a promise of winter. I came downstairs to find Amanda in the kitchen, dressed for what she'd claimed was an important investor meeting. Her makeup was perfect, her smile radiant, the face of a woman about to solve all her problems. "Morning, Mom. Let me make you a nice glass of milk for your vitamins." I fumbled for the recorder's switch in my jacket pocket, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Through the window, I could see neighbors heading to work, oblivious to the life-and-death drama unfolding in my kitchen. Amanda moved with practiced efficiency, pulling out a fresh carton of milk, my weekly vitamin organizer, and the new bottle of digoxin. The morning light caught the label 4 times my normal dose, enough to stop an elephant's heart. She shook out 3 white tablets into her palm, then looked at me with theatrical concern. "You know, Mom, I've been reading about heart conditions online. The internet says older patients often need higher doses as their bodies build tolerance. Amanda, dear, I usually only take 1 heart pill." "The doctor called yesterday," she lied smoothly, dropping the pills into the milk where they began dissolving like tiny bombs. "He said you need to increase the dosage. Your heart is getting weaker, and we can't risk you having an attack." I watched the tablets disappear into the white liquid, knowing that dose would kill me within the hour. Digoxin overdose caused cardiac arrest. It would look like natural causes. The perfect crime, if I'd been the helpless old woman they thought I was. David entered the kitchen, already dressed for work but moving with unusual tension. His lawyer's composure was cracking around the edges, and I could see the desperation beneath his professional mask. "Mom, you need to take your medication properly. Amanda's just trying to help." His voice carried the forced patience of someone at the end of his rope. "We've researched this extensively." "I know, but 3 pills seems like so many." "MOM!" David's voice exploded through the kitchen, echoing off the ceramic tiles. "Just take the damn pills. Do you want to die of a heart attack?" The irony was suffocating. He was shouting at me to prevent the very death he was trying to cause. In that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the successful lawyer he pretended to be, but a frightened man who'd bet everything on get-rich-quick schemes and lost. Jake slouched in, drawn by the commotion like a scavenger to carrion. "God, just take the pills already, Grandma. You're being so dramatic about everything." His casual cruelty cut deeper than his parents' desperation. This was my grandson, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, whose first steps I'd cheered. Now he watched my potential murder with the same bored expression he wore watching television. I held the glass of milk in trembling hands, feeling the weight of dissolved death. The white tablets had created cloudy swirls, like poison mixing with innocence. This was the moment drink and die, or refuse and reveal that I knew their plan. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll drink it." I lifted the glass to my lips, tilted it back, let the liquid touch my mouth, and then my arthritis betrayed me with perfect timing. The glass slipped, milk and dissolved medication splashing across my blouse. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy." Amanda's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing naked fury. Now I have to make another glass. "Don't bother, dear. I can take the pills dry." "No!" Her voice was too sharp, too desperate. "You need to take them with liquid. Doctor's orders." She prepared another lethal cocktail while I sat helplessly, watching my would-be murderers circle like vultures. This time there would be no accidents, no dropped glasses. This time they intended to watch me die. "I think I'll step outside for some fresh air," I said, pushing back from the table. "Absolutely not." David blocked the doorway. "It's too cold. You'll catch pneumonia. Then I'll just go upstairs to rest. Stay here." Amanda's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You need supervision for your own safety." I realized with crystalline clarity that I was trapped. David guarded the front door. Amanda controlled the kitchen and back exit. Jake watched from the living room like a lazy predator. My phone had vanished from my purse sometime during the night. When I moved toward the stairs, David simply stepped into my path. "Mom, you're being difficult. Just sit down and drink your milk." Panic fluttered in my chest like a caged bird. They'd moved beyond subtle poisoning to open imprisonment. The timeline had accelerated. I retreated to the living room, trying to project calm while my mind raced through escape scenarios. The windows were too high. The doors were guarded. My cell phone was gone. Then I remembered something from my corporate days emergency protocols. I'd taught David chess, strategy, and patience, but I'd also taught him something else. Always have a backup plan. Years ago, I'd given Margaret a spare key to my house for emergencies. She still lived 3 miles away, but she had access if needed. More importantly, we'd established a code system during William's illness. If I ever needed help but couldn't call, I would leave a specific signal. I walked to the front window, pretending to look outside casually. Then I moved a particular potted plant from the left side to the right side of the sill, our agreed-upon distress signal. Margaret drove by every Tuesday at 4 p.m. on her way to the book club. It was 4:15 now, but maybe she'd be running late. Amanda was watching me suspiciously. "What are you doing?" "Just getting some air near the window." I feel dizzy, but Amanda had sharp eyes. She noticed the moved plant. "David! She's signaling someone. Look at the window!" David rushed over and saw the repositioned plant. Clever. "But Margaret's not coming to save you, Mom. It's too late." The trap was closing, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Sitting in my own living room, surrounded by people who wanted me dead, something stirred deep in my memory. A voice from long ago, my own voice, strong and uncompromising. I closed my eyes and let myself remember who I used to be. 40 years melted away, and I could hear the nervous shuffle of papers in that smoke-filled boardroom. 12 men in expensive suits, thinking they could steal millions from worker pension funds. And there I was, the only woman at that polished conference table. My voice had cut through their arrogance like a blade. "Gentlemen, I have evidence of your embezzlement scheme. You have 24 hours to resign, or I will contact the FBI." I could still hear the CEO's condescending laugh. "Little lady, you don't know what you're talking about." The satisfaction in my voice when I'd opened that briefcase, spreading out the evidence, altered ledgers, forged signatures, offshore accounts. Within a week, 5 executives had resigned in disgrace. I'd been promoted to vice president, the youngest in company history. The memory shifted, and I could hear a smaller voice. David, at 10 years old, frustrated over our chess game. "In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece," I'd explained, moving my queen across the board, "but she must wait for the right moment to strike." "Are you the queen, Mom?" "I was once," I'd told him. "Now I prefer to be a pawn, protecting the people I love. But pawns are weak. Not all of them. If a pawn reaches the other end of the board, it becomes a queen again." The sound of Amanda's impatient sigh brought me crashing back to the present, back to this room where my own family sat planning my execution. But something had changed in those few seconds of remembering. For 30 years, I'd buried those strategic instincts under layers of maternal sacrifice. I'd forgotten that weakness was a choice, not a fate. But once you learn to be a queen, the knowledge never truly leaves you, and my moment to strike had finally arrived. Wednesday afternoon, the shadows lengthened across the living room, like fingers of death. David, Amanda, and Jake arranged themselves around me in a perfect triangle of menace. They dragged every chair in the house to form this intimate circle of judgment, trapping me in the center like a defendant facing execution. On the coffee table between us sat the glass of milk with 4 digoxin tablets, a lethal cocktail that would stop my heart within 30 minutes. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the poison like a spotlight on my grave. "You have to drink it all," David said, his voice carrying the cold authority of a man who'd made his final decision. Gone was any pretense of the loving son. This was David the lawyer, presenting his closing argument in a case where I was both judge and victim. If you don't, we'll put you in a nursing home. The kind where they strap you to beds and pump you full of sedatives until you forget your own name. A mental institution, Jake added with the casual cruelty that only teenagers can master. He was recording this on his phone, I realized with horror. You're crazy anyway. Maybe some electroshock therapy will fix your attitude. I looked around desperately, searching for any escape route. The front door was locked. I'd heard David turn the deadbolt an hour ago. The kitchen exit led through Amanda's domain. Even the windows were painted shut from years of neglect. My own home had become my tomb. I don't want to take so much medicine. My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. The voice of a frightened old woman facing death. Too bad. Amanda stood up, her patience finally exhausted. We're exhausted. Do you have any idea what it's like living with you? Watching every penny we spend? Having to ask permission to breathe in our own house? Her mask had completely fallen away now, revealing the raw hatred beneath years of forced smiles. Why do you keep living? You're 72 years old. You've had your life. Some of us want to live ours. Amanda! I was genuinely shocked by her venom. What? You think I don't know you've always hated me? The way you look at me like I'm some gold digger who trapped your precious son. She was pacing now, her hands gesturing wildly. Well, guess what? You're right. I did marry him for security, and you've been blocking that security for 10 fucking years. David didn't even try to stop his wife's tirade. Instead, he nodded along like someone finally hearing the truth spoken aloud. You've made this family suffer too long. Always the martyr, always the victim, always holding your sacrifices over our heads like weapons. I gave you everything. Not enough! Jake's voice cracked as he shouted, his teenage rage finally finding its target. You still have the house, the car, your retirement money, and what do we get? Lectures about gratitude, stories about how hard you worked, guilt trips every time we want to buy something nice. The three of them were feeding off each other's anger now, years of resentment pouring out in a toxic flood. This wasn't just about money, this was about control, about freedom, about the crushing weight of obligation they'd carried for years. Drink it. David pushed the glass of milk closer, his hand steady despite the magnitude of what he was asking. Just drink it and let this all be over. We'll tell everyone you died peacefully in your sleep. We'll have a beautiful funeral. We'll cry at your grave. I stared at the glass, that simple container of milk and dissolved death. The liquid had taken on a slightly gray tinge from the medication, like storm clouds in a white sky. If I drank it, in 30 minutes my heart would stop. Amanda would call 911. David would comfort Jake. They'd inherit over $1 million and finally be free of the burden I'd apparently always been. Do you really want me dead? Yes! All three shouted in unison, their voices creating a horrible harmony of hatred. In that moment, sitting in my own living room, surrounded by people I'd given everything to, I understood something fundamental about love and sacrifice. You can pour your entire life into people, and if they don't value that gift, it becomes worthless. Worse than worthless, it becomes a weapon they use against you. I picked up the glass, my hands shaking like leaves. I looked at three cold faces, the people who had once been my entire world. All right, I'll drink it. I brought the glass to my lips, my heart pounding like war drums. In my head, I thought of William, our beautiful memories, and his final words, "Live for yourself." "I'm sorry," I whispered, then drained the glass of milk. David, Amanda, and Jake looked at each other, satisfied. They had won. 15 more minutes, Amanda whispered to her husband. Then we call emergency services and cry a little. I sat there, waiting for death to come. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. David frowned. How much did you give her? 4 times the normal dose. She should be... At exactly 15 minutes, I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years. Strange, I said, savoring the confusion on their faces. I feel wonderful. The 3 would-be murderers stared in shock at their victim, who was as alert as ever. I slowly stood up. Perhaps you should know the truth. Why? Why aren't you dead? Amanda stammered. I walked to the table and picked up the digoxin bottle. Because these aren't heart pills. I shook the bottle and they could hear the rattle of mint candies. These are peppermint candies I bought from the pharmacy. I replaced all the real medication this morning. David went pale. That's impossible. I've known you wanted to kill me since Dr. Thompson warned me yesterday, I said in a terrifyingly calm voice. Last night at Margaret's house, we planned everything. While you slept thinking I was trapped, I snuck back in at 3 a.m. and replaced every pill in this house. I went to the kitchen drawer and opened it. And here's more. I pulled out a professional recording device that was still running. I've recorded everything since I returned home, from when you forced me to drink poison to every word you just said. Amanda and David looked at each other in horror. That's not all. I smiled coldly. Margaret installed hidden cameras yesterday evening while you were out. I pointed to the corner of the ceiling. This camera recorded you forcing me to drink pills. Jake says, just die already. David grabbing my wrist. Amanda mixes medicine at 4 times the dose. Jake shook uncontrollably. You're crazy. No, grandson. I'm just no longer naive. I pulled the small recorder from my jacket pocket. And here are your confessions from today. I pressed play. Amanda's voice filled the room. 15 more minutes, then we call emergency services and cry a little. David's voice followed. We'll tell everyone you died peacefully in your sleep. Jake's voice. You're being so dramatic about everything. As I watched their faces change from triumph to horror, the real timeline flashed through my mind. Yesterday evening, after Dr. Thompson's warning, Margaret and I had worked through the night one desperate night of planning and preparation. We have maybe 12 hours before they force the issue, I'd told her, spreading surveillance equipment across her dining room table. While my family slept, believing I was trapped at Margaret's house, I'd snuck back home at 3 a.m., Moving like a ghost through rooms I knew by heart, I'd systematically replaced every medication with harmless substitutes. The cameras Margaret had ordered with overnight delivery were tiny, easy to install in smoke detectors and light fixtures while they slept. This morning, when David called demanding I come home, I'd already been prepared. The recorder in my pocket had been running since I walked through the front door. "How did you know we'd try today?" David's voice cracked. I smiled at the 3 people who'd just tried to murder me. Because desperate people make desperate timelines. You couldn't wait any longer. David tried desperately. "Mom, we were just trying to help with your medication." "Help?" I laughed bitterly. "By giving me 4 times the prescribed dose?" "We thought..." David's voice cracked, and suddenly I saw him as he truly was. Not the confident lawyer, but the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The medical bills, Mom. Amanda's therapy, Jake's school. We're drowning. I didn't know what else to do. For a moment, genuine anguish flickered in his eyes. This was still my son, the child I'd raised with lullabies and bedtime stories, but that only made his betrayal cut deeper. "I would have helped you," I said quietly, "if you just asked." "We did ask." Amanda's facade finally shattered. "Over and over. But you always said we had to be responsible and learn to manage. Meanwhile, you sat on all that money. Your Instagram hobby was not a career," I said coldly. "It was everything to me." She was sobbing now, but her tears carried no remorse, only self-pity. "You never supported anything I wanted to do." Jake looked between his parents, his teenage bravado crumbling. For the first time, he seemed to truly understand what they'd almost done. I thought you would just go to sleep. I didn't know it would hurt." But you still agreed, I said quietly, for an iPhone. His face crumpled with genuine shame, perhaps the only real emotion in the room. But do you know what? I walked to the window, looking outside. You won't get a single dollar. What? David jumped. I went to the lawyer yesterday. New will. Everything goes to the Children's Orphanage charity. You get nothing. Amanda screamed. That's impossible. That's our money. Whose money? You didn't earn a single dollar. Everything came from my and your father's hard work. David fell to his knees. Mom, please. We were wrong. Take back the will. Too late, I said coldly. You chose to see me as the enemy. Now I'll treat you like enemies. The sirens were getting closer now. Detective Williams led the police team bursting in. Tessa, are you okay? I'm fine, Detective. And I have all the evidence. I handed over the USB containing videos, audio recordings, and thick case files. Everything's in here. Murder plot, confessions, footage of them forcing the victim to drink poison. Detective Williams reviewed the video on her tablet. David Morrison, Amanda Morrison, Jake Morrison. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. No, this is a misunderstanding, Amanda screamed. She's crazy. She made this up. Ma'am, Detective Williams held up the USB. The camera recorded everything. You forced the victim to drink medicine at 4 times the normal dose. This is attempted murder. David made one last attempt, but Mom's still alive. Because Mrs. Morrison was smart enough to replace the real medicine with mint candies. Otherwise, you would be an actual murderer. Margaret ran in. Tess! I heard the police were coming. I'm fine, Margaret. It's all over. Jake sobbed. Grandma. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I looked at my grandson, the child who used to sit on my lap listening to fairy tales. You're 16. You'll be tried as a juvenile, but you must learn to live properly. Will you forgive me? I was silent for a moment. I'll ask the court to give you a chance for rehabilitation. But you can never come back to this house. Police handcuffed David and Amanda. They cried and begged, but I turned away. Mom, don't do this. We were wrong, David cried. 20 years in prison will give you time to think, I said coldly. Detective Williams whispered to me, You were truly brave. Not everyone would dare take such a risk. Detective, when your own children want to kill you, you have nothing left to lose. The police car carrying the 3 criminals drove away. I stood watching, tears flowing silently. Not tears of sadness, but tears of liberation. 2 months later, the courthouse was packed beyond capacity. News vans lined the street outside, satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. I could hear the crowd murmuring as Margaret and I walked through the gauntlet of reporters. Inside, the prosecution presented the evidence with devastating precision. When the video of Amanda forcing me to drink poison played on the courtroom screens, I heard audible gasps from the gallery. A woman in the front row covered her mouth in horror. David's lawyer fought hard. Your Honor, my client was under extreme financial pressure. The stress of caring for an elderly parent with failing memory. Objection, the prosecutor shot back. Mrs. Morrison's medical records show no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, turning to face the packed courtroom, the defendants researched digoxin overdose symptoms and how to make murder look natural. This wasn't mercy, it was calculated murder for financial gain. A reporter in the back row scribbled furiously. The court sketch artist's pencil moved rapidly across her pad. When Amanda's lawyer called her to the stand, you could hear a pin drop. She performed beautifully, tears on cue, voice breaking at just the right moments. I loved her like my own mother, she sobbed. I was trying to help her with medication she kept forgetting to take. I watched several jurors nod sympathetically until the prosecutor played the recording. This week, before anyone gets suspicious. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged her gavel 3 times. Jake's testimony silenced everyone completely. They told me it would be mercy, that she was suffering. I was 16 and stupid. I believed them. When the judge returned with her verdict, the silence was deafening. David Morrison, 15 years in state prison. Amanda Morrison, 12 years. Jake Morrison, 2 years juvenile rehabilitation. David's face crumpled. Amanda screamed as they led her away. She's a vindictive old witch who destroyed her own family. The gallery erupted, some people cheering, others shouting questions at me. Cameras flashed like lightning. Jake whispered as they took him away, "Grandma, I know you'll never forgive me, but I really am sorry." As we left through the crowd of reporters, I felt not triumph, but a deep, aching sadness. Justice had been served. The courthouse steps were a circus of reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers. I'd become an overnight sensation, the grandmother who'd outsmarted her would-be killers. Prime-time stories wanted an exclusive. Morning America Today had called 3 times. Streamvision was interested in the movie rights. I stood at the courthouse entrance, Margaret at my side like a bodyguard, and faced the wall of microphones and questions. "Mrs. Morrison, how does it feel to know your family tried to murder you? Mrs. Morrison, were you scared they might succeed? Mrs. Morrison, what advice do you have for other elderly people?" I raised my hand and the crowd fell silent. "I have a statement." The cameras zoomed in, broadcasting my words to millions of homes across America. For 50 years, I believed that unconditional love meant accepting any treatment from family members. I believed that being a good mother, good grandmother, meant sacrificing everything for my children's happiness. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I was wrong. A reporter shouted from the back, "Do you regret turning them in?" I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my love wasn't returned with even basic human decency. But I don't regret surviving. My voice grew stronger. And I don't regret showing other older Americans that we don't have to be victims. We don't have to accept abuse because it comes from the family. "What's next for you, Mrs. Morrison?" I thought about the letters already pouring in, hundreds of them from elderly people sharing their own stories of family betrayal, financial abuse, and worse. I'm starting a foundation, the Tessa Morrison Foundation for Elder Protection. We'll help older Americans recognize abuse, gather evidence, and fight back legally. Even against their own families? Especially against their own families. I looked directly into the nearest camera. Blood relationship doesn't give anyone the right to steal from you, abuse you, or murder you. Love should make you safer, not more vulnerable. The crowd erupted with follow-up questions, but I was done. Margaret and I pushed through the mass of reporters toward her car, where Detective Williams waited with a police escort. "Quite a speech," Detective Williams said as we drove away from the circus. "You're going to get a lot of attention." Good. Maybe it'll save some lives. In the back seat, I opened the first of many letters that had arrived that morning. "Dear Mrs. Morrison, my name is Helen Rodriguez and I am 85 years old. After seeing your story on the news, I finally have the courage to tell someone what my son has been doing to me. He moved into my house last year to take care of me, but he's been stealing my Social Security checks and threatening to put me in a nursing home if I complain. I don't have anyone else to turn to. Can you help me? Please. I don't want to die afraid." I folded the letter carefully and added it to the growing pile. By the end of the week, I'd received over 300 similar letters, each one a story of betrayal, each one a life that could still be saved. My family had tried to destroy me, but instead they'd given me the most important purpose of my life. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, a small but comfortable cottage 3 miles from Oak Street. The Victorian house had sold within a week, every penny donated to Children's Haven as promised. Real estate agents had called it the murder house, but that notoriety only drove up interest. Apparently, people enjoyed living in places where justice had triumphed over evil. Margaret knocked on the back door, carrying a casserole and local gossip in equal measure. She'd aged in these past months, the stress of helping me through the investigation taking its toll on her 70-year-old frame. But her eyes still sparkled with the mischief that had made us friends 3 decades ago. "The Morning News wants to interview you again," she said, settling the dish on my counter next to a vase of fresh sunflowers, her weekly contribution to brightening my space. "I'm done with interviews." I poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs I'd bought at a thrift store. Starting over at 73 meant learning to live with less, and I was discovering the freedom that came with having fewer possessions to worry about. I have more important work now. On my kitchen table sat a laptop, my first ever, and stacks of letters that arrived daily. The Tessa Morrison Foundation for Elder Protection was officially launching next month, with initial funding from the book deal Stream Vision had optioned for a limited series. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's attempt to murder me had made me financially independent for the first time in decades. "Tell me about Mrs. Patterson," I said, opening the most recent case file. Margaret settled into the chair William used to occupy during our morning coffee ritual 30 years ago. 74 years old. Her son's trying to force her into a nursing home so he can sell her house. Classic financial abuse. But here's the interesting part. Her neighbor has been documenting everything with a security camera. Smart neighbor. Schedule a call with her tomorrow and contact Detective Williams. We'll need official documentation for the restraining order. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We now had a toll-free hotline staffed 24 hours a day, a network of volunteer lawyers in 30 states, and partnerships with police departments nationwide. Every week brought new cases, new victories, new lives saved from the predators who should have been protectors. What surprised me most was how many calls we received from middle-aged children, worried about their elderly parents being abused by siblings. Family predators, it turned out, often targeted the most vulnerable member while manipulating others to look the other way. The patterns were disturbingly consistent: isolation, financial control, medical manipulation, and finally, when the victim became too much trouble, elimination. A knock at the front door interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman, maybe 25, clutching a folder against her chest like armor. Her clothes were expensive but wrinkled, her makeup smeared from tears. She had the look of someone who'd been driving all night to get here. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm Jennifer Collins. I saw your interview on CNN. My grandmother, she's in trouble. Her family is..." She broke down, shoulders shaking with the weight of terrible secrets. I opened the door wider, recognizing the desperation in her eyes because I'd seen it in my own mirror not so long ago. "Come in, dear. You're safe now." As I guided her to the living room, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the frightened victim who'd fled to Margaret's house 8 months ago. This woman stood straight, moved with purpose, met the world with clear, steady eyes. Her hair was shorter now, styled in a way that suggested efficiency rather than vanity. She wore simple clothes that didn't scream wealth, but spoke of quiet confidence. At 73, I'd finally learned the difference between loving people and letting them destroy you. More importantly, I'd learned that survival could be its own form of service. A year later, I found myself in another courtroom. This one was smaller, quieter, but the stakes felt just as high for the elderly woman whose case we'd built. As I watched Mrs. Patterson's son squirm at the defendant's table, my thoughts drifted back to my own trial. The sound of that judge's gavel still echoed in my memory sometimes, that decisive crack that had separated my old life from my new one. "Verdict in favor of the plaintiff," the judge's voice rang out in the present, pulling me from my memories. Mr. Patterson, you are hereby barred from any involvement in your mother's financial affairs. The court also awards damages in the amount of $50,000. Mrs. Patterson caught my eye and nodded, 82 years old and fierce as ever. Another victory, another life saved. Walking to the parking garage afterward, Detective Williams fell into step beside me. 12 cases this year, she said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd found their true calling. 12 families who thought they could profit from abusing their elderly relatives. And 12 families who discovered they were wrong. I checked my phone, 3 new voicemails from people who needed help. The foundation was busier than ever. Detective, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Are you planning to retire anytime soon? Because the foundation needs an experienced investigator, someone who knows how these predators think. She laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Tessa Morrison, are you trying to recruit me? I'm trying to build an army. I paused by my car, gathering the stack of new case files from the back seat. Elder abuse is an epidemic, Sarah. Every day, thousands of older Americans are being robbed, abused, or murdered by their own families. We can't save them all, but we can save more. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made my heart skip. Grandma, I graduate from rehab next month. Can we talk? I've been sober for 8 months and I understand now what I did was unforgivable, but I want to try to make amends somehow. Jake. I pulled over to read it again. Jake had served his time, completed his therapy, and by all accounts become a different person than the cruel teenager who'd casually discussed my death. His letters from juvenile detention had grown increasingly remorseful over the months. My fingers hovered over the phone keyboard. Forgiveness and trust were different things. I'd learned that much. But redemption. Redemption was possible, even for those who'd chosen wrongly. I typed back, call me next week. We'll see. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a door left slightly open. The familiar streets rolled by my window streets that had once felt dangerous, but now seemed simply like home. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from victim to survivor to guardian of others like me. For 73 years, I'd defined myself through other people's needs, first as a daughter, then a wife, then a mother, then nearly as a victim. But now, finally, I was simply Tessa Morrison, and that was more than enough. 6 months later, I stood in my new cottage kitchen, flour dusting my hands as I rolled out pie crust, something I hadn't done in years. The smell of cinnamon and apples filled the air, a scent that reminded me of better times when baking was joy, not obligation. Margaret knocked, bringing her usual casserole. How did the Patterson case go? She won everything back. I dusted off my hands and poured coffee into mismatched mugs. One said, "World's best mom," a cruel irony I'd kept anyway. House, independence, 50,000 in damages. Detective Williams called. She's taking the job. Whoa. We ate in comfortable silence until Margaret mentioned David had called from prison therapy sessions, Amanda's divorce, abandonment. Before the weight of this could settle, the phone rang. Tessa Morrison Foundation. This is Tessa. Mrs. Morrison? I think my daughter-in-law is trying to kill my wife. She's been asking about medications, and yesterday I found extra pills dissolved in her coffee. Mr. Collins, you absolutely did the right thing calling. I reached for my notepad, slipping into the familiar rhythm. First, we need to get your wife somewhere safe. Do you have a trusted friend or family member she could stay with tonight? As I guided him through the safety protocols, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. 73 years old, flour still on my apron, but my eyes were bright with purpose. When I finished the call and hung up, Margaret was watching me with a small smile. What? You look content. More than I've seen you in years. Doer. I glanced at my half-made pie, thought about the evening ahead. Maybe I'd call Mrs. Patterson, check how she was settling back into her house. Tomorrow I'd read the letters piling up on my counter, each one a life that might still be saved. "I suppose I am," I said. "For the first time in decades, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Sometimes you have to stop being a pawn and remember how to be a queen. The old Tessa Morrison had died in that Victorian house, but someone stronger had emerged, someone who understood that surviving wasn't enough. You had to help others survive too. Outside, darkness settled over my small town, but inside my cottage the lights were warm, the pie would be ready soon, and tomorrow would bring new battles to fight, new lives to save. The queen had returned to the board, and this time, she was playing to win. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and justice, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps me continue telling stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. To listen to the next story about courage in the face of betrayal, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching, and remember, it's never too late to fight for your own life.